Hey guys, so in this one we're going to add damage multiplier to our abilities so they can have increased damage, and then we're also going to fix critical hit chance so we can score some critical hits. First thing we're going to do is let's go to structs and deities and let's open ability struct, and in here we're going to add variable which will be damage multiplier, so we can set it on each different ability. This will be float. And what we can also do is go to default values and change it to 1 by default, because this will be multiplied by damage, so in case we forgot to set it somewhere, it will always be at least 1. And then in the data table, abilities DT, stone form won't be affected by this. Later on we can actually upgrade the stone form to like level 2, and that will be adding different buff. But for now I just want to focus on the damaging abilities. So for Whirlwind, we're going to change this damage multiplier to 2, so it will cost double the damage. Save it. And then where do we actually set it? Like, where do we call it? So let's go to combat components. I'm going to close this too. And best place would be to set it up here on a line trace. And before we passing the damage, we can multiply it by the multiplier. But we need to know what ability is actually starting this line trace. For that we need to do a few things, so we're going to add the parameter here, and this will be damage multiplier. Again, it will be float. We will promote it to variable here. Same name, just can remove the space and then connect it here. And what we can also edit is we do have this radius, so just in case we want to increase the radius on some abilities, we will be able to do that. So let's promote that to variable, and this will just be line trace radius. And copy it, and we do have a second line trace for offhand, so connect it there as well. And again, we will add it here on the beginning. And can we drag it? Yeah, add it as a pin. And this will be line trace radius. And then what we want to do on this line trace, let's set it by default. So damage multiplier will be default value 1. And line trace default value will be 40, as we had it before. Compile and save. And now we need to change it where we're actually calling the line trace. And we're only calling it from the montages with anim notifies. So in the anim notifies, we do have attack line trace, and when we receive this notify, then we're starting the line trace, and here we can change it. So on this notify, we're going to create variables. First one will be ability, so we can select which ability will be using it in each montage, and this will be type abilities enumerator. And what else do we need? And we can set line trace radius directly, so line trace radius, which will be float, and we want to make both of these instance editable, and we're going to connect the line trace here, so get line trace radius, again compile and save it, and let's change it to 40 by default so we don't have to change it on all of the attacks, and add it here. Now we should have a default ability in enumerator. If you don't, you need to create the default one, because then we're going to check if the ability is set. So if this equals enumerator default, do branch, we're going to start line tracing like this. We do damage multiplier of 1, because this ability is default, so we don't have to change anything. But if it's false, we need to get this again. We can't really do it with the select, so we have to do it on the branch. And we'll start line trace, and this time we're going to get ability from learned abilities. So we need to get owner, and we can get this component by class as well. So copy this part, add it, and we're looking for ability component, and we're going to get learned abilities, And from here we're going to find this ability. So copy this and this ability. And then in here, if we break it open, we do have damage multiplier, so we're going to add it here. Line radius, if you wanted, you could add it to data table as well. I want to set it manually, so I'm just going to copy this variable. So now basically on the line trace itself, we're going to set up what ability we're executing with this line trace on each montage, and then it finds the damage multiplier that it needs, or we can customize the line trace radius, which is a little bit better. So compile and save. Target, I forgot here to start line trace is the combat component, this one here. And one more target, get owner needs to be from mesh comp. Right, now let's go to whirlwind ability montage, which is in animations, abilities, and not the animation itself, the montage. And here we're executing the line trace. So select the line trace, and here you can see now we do have abilities. So this one will be whirlwind. And line trace radius will be, I can change it to 60, so it's a little bit bigger, so we can hit more enemies. And now that will pass it to the line trace directly to combat component. It will get us the multiplier, and it will be able to execute this line trace. For now, we're not actually multiplying the damage with it. So what we're going to do first, before I forget, let's stop the line trace. I should have done that in a previous video. This is for the reason that if we interrupt attacking with ability, because we can do that, we can attack and we can execute ability, the line trace might not stop, and then we're starting it again, which might cause us some issues. So always stop the line trace. And in stop line trace, just to make sure, where is the stop line trace? I'm going to find it here, stop line trace, and here we're going to reset this value to default 1. So damage multiplier is going to be 1, and line trace radius is going to be 40. As I said, this is just to prevent some issues. And now we want to multiply the damage, so find when we're applying point damage. And here we need to, from the max stat, we're going to multiply by damage multiplier. Get the damage multiplier. And then we connect it here. So if it's greater than 0, we're going to apply point damage. Because there is no point if we don't have any damage, which shouldn't happen, but again, better to prevent some issues before they even happen. So if it's more than 0, we're going to damage multiply this ability, and then also, sorry, we need to plug it to base damage here. So if the damage multiplier is 1, it won't do anything, it will just multiply like 50 damage by 1, which is still 50, but if the damage multiplier is 2, it will double the damage. And now that's all we need to do. So now with the abilities, I should be able to cause double damage with my whirlwind. So let's add the weapon. This one is causing 20 physical and 20 fire damage. I'm going to set this to quick slot. Equip the weapon, and now if I hit, you can see I'm causing 20 and 20. But if I hit with this one, it's 40 and 40. Because all damage is doubled that I currently have. Alright, so that is working fine. Let me try one more time. So apply it 40 and 40. Alright, so that's how we do multiplier for abilities. So now we can create all the custom abilities. They can have very different multipliers. If you have like level 5 spells later or something, you can multiply it by 5 and stuff like that. So now to sort out the critical hit chance, it is not as easy as just adding one function. What is the best way I found is doing it in the damage receiver, so the NPC that receives the damage, or the player. So we're going to do it in take damage basically, and here before we calculate the damage we will check if we score the critical hit. We will do it only once, same as we have those events that need to execute only once, because we have multiple damage types and you don't want to hit critical hit chance separately on them. So we will do it once. That way we have to set it in event graph, and then after we calculate it we will just set that we are critical hitting and tell our damage indicator as well to display differently. So let's start by going to event graph, here where we have this sequence that resets all the functions that we're executing once. We're going to create new events, so copy do once node, add custom event, and this will be calculate critical hit chance. Calculate critical hit chance, and then what we want to do here, connect it to do once node, and again before we forget, let's connect it to this sequence that will reset it after each attack. And we will need to pass it the damage causer, because this will be on the receiving end. So damage causer, that will be actor type, object reference, and here we want to, from damage causer, get component by class. We need to get stats component, and just I forgot to mention that this is very optional. I know lots of the games don't have critical hit chance, but most of the MMOs and everything have critical hit chance. So if you don't want to set it up, you don't really have to. It won't change anything. But if you do, get the stats component, we will get max stat, because that's where the critical hit chance and damage is scored. So get critical hit chance, and then we're going to just simply roll, which will be random float in range. We could do integer as well, but this is a little bit more precise. And range will be 0 to 100, so 100% chance. And if our critical hit chance will be greater or equal, we can do then this roll. Then we score the critical hit, and we will do branch. And we will need the boolean variable as well to tell us if it's a critical hit, and that is just for damage indicator, so we can tell it to display differently. So let's create variable, and this one will be is critical hit. So here we'll set it to true and false, and then we need to calculate the damage multiplier. We will do it only once, so we will also need to promote it to variable. And damage multiplier we will get by getting the max stat again from this. This time we get critical hit damage. So that's how it works. If you score critical hit damage, you will add if you score critical hit, then you will add critical hit damage to it. And this, think of it as the percentage. I think at the moment on the player I had it set up from like the beginning. Critical hit damage is 50. So it will add 50% on top of our damage. It won't be multiplying it. For that we will get our, what we need to get stats component, we need to divide it by damage. Let me think quickly. I forgot how the calculations goes. Right, okay. So divide it by 100, because we need to get percentage, which will be 0.5%. And then this will be the damage multiplier. So let's promote it to variable, and we already have damage multiplier, so this will be critical damage multiplier. And set it here. And if it's false, if it didn't score critical hits, then this will be 0. We won't be adding anything to it. And after that, I'm just going to add print string so we can see if we score the critical hit. And this will say, or we can do it from here. So it will be true or false critical hit. I'll just connect it on that. That will tell us if we scored it. And now in take damage, so on the receiving end, what we need to do is before we calculate damage, we want to also call that event, which is calculate hit chance. So calculate critical hit chance, connect it. We need damage causer from the function, so we can get damage causer, connect it, and then that will give us the multiplier. So we need one more function that will multiply the damage by the multiplier. And this one can be, you can set up new one, which will be calculate crit damage. And what we need to do in this one is just very simple. We will get the critical damage multiplier. Careful, don't get just the damage multiplier, that will mess it up. And we will multiply this by damage, which will be input. So damage and type float. And then we're not going to leave it like that, because if this was 0, then the damage would be 0. We want to add it to the damage like this. And then we return note. And we will return this, and we can call it final damage again. Right, so if we didn't score a critical hit, this multiplier will be set to 0 for the whole attack, and it won't be multiplying anything. But if we score the critical hit damage, it will add it to our existing damage and return it. Then in the take damage, we'll connect it. And connect it here. Sorry, this stunt as well needs to go in the beginning as well, because it also needs to calculate critical hit damage. And the damage here is, we can do Ctrl+X on this one and paste it here, and then connect this one final damage to calculate damage reduction from it. Right. Compile and save. And now this is it for actually causing critical hit damage. Now if I go to player and go to stats component and do critical hit chance, I only got 2%, so I'm going to do 50. And damage multiplier will be 100, so it will be double damage. And now, again, I'll pick up this sword, which got 20 and 20. So every second hit, I should be causing, you can see on this one, I caused 42 damage. So 20, and this is 42. I'm not actually sure why is it 42. It's probably just because the damage reduction, how it is calculated. So 42, 42, 42, 20, 42, 42. All right. So that seems to be working fine. Now we just need to display it. Let me just quickly check why it might be happening. That damage multiplier, we got it divided, so 100 divided by 100 is 1. And then we calculate critical hit damage. 1 times damage, which is 20, and we add it to damage. Yeah, it's working fine. I think it's just the calculation is a little bit different then, but it should be 40. I'll figure it out eventually. So for now, leave it as it is, and we want to display it. So we need to tell the NPC. Let's go to NPCs, third person, blueprints, NPC, and enemy. And since damage indicator is only on the enemy, we need to tell him here that we're taking critical hit damage. So in this spawn damage indicator, which is an interface function in combat BPI, we need to add is critical hit. So open interfaces, combat BPI, find spawn damage indicator, and then add input boolean is critical hit. Compile and save. Let's go back to enemy, and now we will have to, actually we don't have to add it to the damage because it's our component, because we're calculating in and taking damage. So we will just get combat component and is critical, get is critical hit, which again, if you score critical hit for the duration of the whole one attack, doesn't matter how many damage types, it will be critical hit, and then it will reset to false on the next attack unless we score a critical hit again. So it will pass it, spawn damage indicator. This goes to damage indicator and widget. Let's search for it and open it up. And then we also need to pass it to the damage indicator itself. So let's open the damage indicator from here, and let's create a new variable, and this is critical hit. We'll make it instance editable and also expose on spawn, because this is doing everything on pre-construct. So if you don't pass it straight away, then we won't be able to actually tell if it's critical hit. And now in the end, we're going to get this, do branch, do critical hit, and now if it is actually critical hit, we're going to get the damage text and increase the size. So set font, or just set font, and since this has a lot of font info that we will have to fill up, what we can do is get font from it, and we will set members in slate font info. On this one, we're going to select just size, and we will increase it from 24 to 40, and then struct out will go here. That way nothing else will change, only the size. And if it's false, I don't think we need to do anything. It will just be by default. Alright, so now we just need to pass it from damage indicator placeholder and just connect it here. And that should actually work. Let me pick up some weapon. I'm going to test it out with something else. This sword has 12 physical damage. There we go. Critical hit, 26, 26, 26, 26, 26. Seems to be hitting. Ah, alright. That one wasn't critical. So there you go. So I'm causing 12 or 26 damage. Still feels like I'm adding to it for some reason. Did I reset the damage indicator? So this one is critical hit damage is 100. That's fine. Critical hit chance. Combat component. Critical hit damage multiplier is 0. Not sure why I'm causing like 2 extra damage. I'll have to look at it offline, but this is pretty much it. So it's working as intended. Now if you were to decrease your critical hit chance to like 20%, which is a little bit more normal, and again equip some weapon, (20) and then 47, so double the damage. Alright, as you can see, I only sometimes hit it on the enemies, but that's how critical damage works. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this video. I'll just have a look one more time because it's bothering me why it's causing so much damage. So damage we got here, and calculate damage reduction, and then final damage. Yeah, I think it's generally just calculate damage reduction is a little bit different from higher percentage, because it's nothing to do with this one. Anyway, I'll have a look again. So, hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! I'm actually dumb. I just realized it straight away after I turned off the video, and that is just because on my weapons I actually have some critical hit damage and critical hit chance, so it's increasing that damage. That's why it's calculating different than just double damage. So pretty much all of my weapons have critical hit damage. So that was it.